In the heart of a vast and bustling metropolis, where glass towers scraped the sky and the streets buzzed with the constant hum of life, lived a man whose wealth could buy nearly anything. His name was Alexander Crawford. Born into a family of old money and prestige, Alexander never had to lift a finger to achieve success. By his mid-20s, he had already inherited vast properties, shares in multinational corporations, and enough money to live in comfort for the rest of his life, no matter how extravagantly. But despite all this, Alexander found himself alone in a crowd, yearning for something money could not buy: love. Real love. Not the shallow affection offered to him at gala events by women dazzled by his suits, or the transactional relationships proposed by those who saw him as their ticket to a glamorous life. No, Alexander wanted someone who would see him, not as a millionaire or a benefactor, but as a human being, with hopes, dreams, flaws, and vulnerabilities. For years, Alexander had tried to find love in his own world. He attended elegant dinners, threw lavish parties, and even went on exclusive vacations where he mingled with the rich and famous. But nothing ever felt right. The more women he met, the more he felt the cold hands of doubt gripping his heart. Did they love him for who he was, or for the life he could give them? Could he trust anyone in a world where everyone had an angle, a scheme, or an ambition? One evening, after yet another tiresome social event filled with hollow conversations and polite, insincere laughter, Alexander returned to his penthouse, overlooking the glittering city below. He stood by the window, staring at the endless sea of lights, but all he felt was darkness. The thought that haunted him night after night was this: would anyone ever love him for who he truly was, stripped of all the trappings of wealth? It was then that an audacious idea began to take root in his mind. What if, for just a short time, he abandoned his wealth and his status? What if he disguised himself as someone without a penny to his name, someone living on the streets? Would he then be able to find someone who loved him for his character and his heart, rather than his fortune? The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more he thought about it, the more it intrigued him. What better way to test the sincerity of others than to remove the very thing that drew them to him in the first place, his wealth? And so, after much deliberation, Alexander made up his mind. He would go undercover as a homeless man for a month. Seeking the truth that had eluded him all his life, the next morning, Alexander set his plan into motion. He called his lawyer and his closest friend, Richard. Richard had been by his side since childhood, one of the few people Alexander trusted implicitly. Richard, of course, thought the plan was madness. "Are you serious?" he asked, pacing around Alexander's luxurious living room. "You want to live on the streets? What if something happens to you out there?" Alexander, calm and resolute, replied, "It's the only way, Richard. I need to know if there's someone out there who can love me for me. Not for the money, not for the lifestyle. Just me." After much debate, Richard reluctantly agreed to help. He arranged for Alexander's affairs to be handled discreetly during his absence, making sure no one in their circles would notice his disappearance. With the preparations complete, Alexander began his transformation. His tailored suits were replaced with tattered jeans and a ragged coat. His shoes, once polished to a shine, were swapped for old, worn boots with holes in the soles. His clean-shaven face grew a scruffy beard, and his neatly styled hair became unruly. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt truly invisible as he stepped onto the streets of the city. Gone were the admiring glances from strangers, the respectful nods from doormen, and the eager smiles from women passing by. He was just another nameless figure among the city's homeless, blending into the background of society's blind spots. The first night was a rude awakening. Alexander, having always slept in the finest beds, now found himself lying on a hard bench in a public park. The cold bit at his skin, and the noises of the city, once soothing, now felt ominous and uninviting. He wrapped his thin coat tighter around him, shivering as the hours dragged on. Sleep didn't come easily. As the days passed, Alexander began to understand the harsh reality of life on the streets. The hunger, the exhaustion, the constant battle to find shelter from the weather, all of it was a far cry from the life of privilege he had known. He wandered from park to park, street to street, sitting with other homeless men and women, listening to their stories. Most ignored him, too wrapped up in their own struggles, while others offered him a few kind words or shared a scrap of food. But Alexander wasn't just living this life to understand hardship, he was searching for something deeper. Every day, he watched people as they passed by. Some hurried past him without a second glance, while others, their eyes filled with disdain, threw insults his way. Yet there were also a few rare souls who stopped, even if just for a moment, to offer a smile, a coin, or a kind word. But none of these brief interactions felt like the connection he was seeking. Then, one evening, as Alexander sat outside a small soup kitchen, his luck changed. The air was crisp, and the streets were beginning to clear as the night deepened. Alexander, huddled in his coat, stared at the ground, lost in thought, when he heard a soft voice call out, "Would you like some food?" He looked up and saw a woman standing before him, holding a steaming bowl of soup. She had soft brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and her clothes were simple but clean. Her face, though not adorned with makeup or flashy jewelry, held a quiet beauty, the kind that glows from within. "Here," she said with a gentle smile, handing him the bowl. "You look like you could use a warm meal." Alexander, taken aback by her kindness, accepted the soup gratefully. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He hadn't expected anyone to stop, let alone offer him something so freely. The woman sat down beside him on the curb, her own bowl of soup in hand. "My name's Lily," she said, offering her hand. Alexander hesitated for a moment, then shook her hand. "I'm Alex," he replied, keeping his real identity hidden for now. For the next hour, they sat together in the quiet of the night, eating in companionable silence. Lily asked him about his life on the streets, and though Alexander couldn't tell her the whole truth, he shared bits and pieces of his fabricated story. She listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. In the days that followed, Alexander found himself returning to the same spot outside the soup kitchen, hoping to see Lily again. And every day, like clockwork, she appeared, always with a warm smile, always with something to offer, whether it was food, conversation, or simply her presence. As they spent more time together, Alexander learned more about Lily's life. She wasn't wealthy by any means. In fact, she lived in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, working as a nurse during the day and volunteering at the soup kitchen in the evenings. She had grown up in a small town and had come to the city to pursue her dreams of helping others, despite the financial hardships she faced. Lily's kindness and compassion were unlike anything Alexander had ever encountered in his world of privilege. She didn't care about appearances, status, or material wealth. What mattered to her was how people treated one another, especially those who were struggling. It was this quality that drew Alexander to her more and more each day. One chilly evening, as they sat together in the park, watching the sunset cast a golden glow over the city, Alexander felt a surge of emotion he hadn't anticipated. He realized that he was falling in love with Lily. She saw him not as a homeless man or a millionaire, but simply as Alex, a man she had come to care for, without judgment or expectation. But as his feelings for her deepened, so did his guilt. He had deceived her, hiding the truth about who he really was. He feared that if she found out, she would feel betrayed, and everything they had built would come crashing down. How could he ever tell her the truth without losing her? One night, as they walked along the riverbank, the moonlight reflecting off the water in shimmering patterns, Alexander knew he couldn't hide the truth any longer. He had to tell her, no matter the cost. "Lily," he began, his voice thick with hesitation, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned to him, her eyes filled with concern. "What is it, Alex?" He took a deep breath, gathering the courage he needed. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. I'm not really homeless. At least, not in the way you think." Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Alexander swallowed hard and continued. "I'm not who I said I was. My name isn't Alex. It's Alexander Crawford. I'm a millionaire. I've been living on the streets to find someone who could love me for who I am, not for my money." The words hung in the air between them like a heavy weight, and for a moment, there was silence. Lily stared at him, her face a mixture of shock, confusion, and hurt. "You've been lying to me this whole time." Alexander's heart ached as he saw the pain in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you, Lily. I didn't know how else to find someone who could love me for me. I didn't expect to meet someone like you. You're kind, and selfless, and everything I've been searching for." Lily looked away, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I thought I knew you." Alexander reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You do know me, Lily. The man I've been with you, he's real. I'm still that person. I didn't want my money to define me anymore." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she turned back to him. "It's not the money that bothers me, Alex. It's the fact that you lied. How can I trust anything you've said after this?" Alexander's heart sank. He had feared this moment, but he knew he couldn't undo the past. All he could do was be honest now. "I'm sorry, Lily. I truly am. I was wrong to deceive you. But everything I've felt for you is real. Please believe that." Lily was silent for a long time, the only sound between them the gentle lapping of the river against the shore. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I need time, Alex. This is a lot to process." Alexander nodded, his chest tight with regret. "Take all the time you need," he said quietly. They parted ways that night, and for the first time in weeks, Alexander felt truly alone again. The next few days were agonizing for him. He returned to his penthouse, the vast space feeling cold and empty without Lily's warmth. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, as he replayed their last conversation over and over in his mind, wondering if he had lost her forever. Then, one morning, there was a knock on his door. Alexander's heart raced as he opened it to find Lily standing there, her eyes red but determined. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And while I'm still hurt that you lied to me, I've come to realize something. The man I cared about, the one who was kind, thoughtful, and compassionate, that man was real. It wasn't your money or your status that I fell for. It was you." Alexander's eyes filled with tears as he stepped toward her. "Lily, I promise you, I will never lie to you again. I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you'll let me." Lily hesitated for only a moment before stepping into his arms. "I love you too, Alex," she whispered. But this time, no more secrets, and from that day forward, there were none. Alexander and Lily's love grew stronger with every passing day. They worked together to help those in need, using Alexander's wealth not for personal gain, but to make a difference in the world. And in doing so, they built a life filled with the one thing Alexander had longed for more than anything: true, unconditional love. They were married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by the people they had helped and the friends they had made along the way. It was a far cry from the grand, opulent weddings Alexander had once imagined, but it was perfect in every way that mattered, and so, Alexander Crawford, the millionaire who had once gone undercover to find love, discovered that true wealth wasn't measured by the money in his bank account, but by the love and compassion he shared with the woman who had seen the real him. Together, they lived happily ever after, not in a palace of gold, but in a world they had built with love, honesty, and kindness.